Get out of here. John's words shocked me. I stood frozen in surprise, my mouth agape, wordless. It seems they do not understand their position. They better brace themselves. There's no other way but to make them understand my position. The moment I resolved myself, a wry smile appeared on my face. My name is Wendy Smith. I am a 52-year-old full-time employee at a certain food manufacturing company. Being a full-time employee at this age often leads to the misunderstanding that I am single. However, I am not single. I married John in my 20s, and soon after, we had our son, Matt. Matt has since become independent and is married. Currently, I live happily with John and my mother-in-law, Diane, just the three of us. But it's not without its problems. Diane has aged and her legs have grown significantly weaker. There are often times when I need to support her. However, John tends to ignore his mother's condition. She's your mother. Don't you think about helping? When I asked, John turned his face away. I wish he would be more considerate of the family. Especially lately, I've felt this way more frequently. John works as a graphic designer, currently freelance, but he used to work in the creative department of an advertising agency. That's where we met, when he came to my company on business. Do you have any questions? John asked me. This part is a bit. Oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be commenting as an amateur. No, advertising isn't just for professionals. Your opinion is valuable. John kindly replied. He was a warm-hearted person. That was my first impression of John. After some business interactions, John proposed we start dating, which, needless to say, led to marriage. However, about 10 years after our marriage, John mentioned he wanted to quit his job and start his own business. Can you really make a living on your own? I continued working after our marriage, so we had a comfortable life. But our son, Matt, was already in upper elementary school at this time. While there were no issues currently, we anticipated future expenses like tutoring. Plus, we had to consider the possibility of neither John or I being able to work in the future. For these reasons, I couldn't agree with John giving up his stable situation. This led me to question him. I can still get work from my current workplace, so don't worry. You work from home too, right? How? Work from home? You used to go to the office, but now you work from home, right? Indeed, I had transitioned to telework after getting married, primarily to ensure I had time at home and to prioritize household chores. There was a vacancy for the company's online store operations, which suited me perfectly. Thus, I decided to continue teleworking. However, John seemed to misunderstand that I had quit my job to do a side business at home. That's not a side business. It's just my job being done from home. No need to exaggerate. Whether it's a side job or not, it's still proper work. No matter how many times I explained, John wouldn't accept it. As a result, our conversation ended without resolving his misunderstanding. We had several discussions afterwards, but John never changed his stance. In the meantime, John quit his job and started his own business. I couldn't hide my anxiety, but contrary to my fears, John's business was doing well. He looked happier and more relaxed than before. It seems to be going well. Yeah, I get work through connections from my previous job and I can spend weekends with Matt, so it's really good. That's great. I felt relieved. However, a few years later, a new problem arose, which I brought up to John. Putting Mom in a nursing home? Yes, your mother herself wants it. She's become less mobile and wants to be admitted. What do you mean? John's interrogative tone left me speechless. I do want to take care of my mother-in-law. However, with both housework and my job, it's not that simple. Moreover, Matt is in middle school, facing high school entrance exams. With the need for support in various areas, I can't focus solely on my mother-in-law. After explaining these circumstances to John, he became visibly angry and vented his frustration. So, you plan to abandon my mother? It's not like that. But your mother herself. But that's what it comes down to, isn't it? If it's too hard, you could just quit your side job. I was at a loss for words to John's remark. In reality, Our household's financial situation depends on my income. John contributes, but it's a small amount. If I quit my job, we wouldn't be able to make ends meet. However, I couldn't convey this reality to John. He has a high pride, and knowing I am the main breadwinner might upset him like a child. It could lead to divorce, and in the worst case, he might leave the house. In that case, I wouldn't be able to take care of Matt and my mother-in-law alone. So, I remained silent. This silence marked the end of the discussion. Even if we didn't send my mother-in-law to a nursing home, my burden wouldn't increase. Indeed, her mobility has declined, but she can still manage most of her daily life on her own, and there are few situations where she needs my help. If she can sit in a chair, she can even cook. Therefore, having my mother-in-law at home to help with household tasks was actually more helpful for me. As time went by, Matt graduated from high school and moved out for college. My burden was significantly reduced, and gradually, I could pay more attention to my mother-in-law. One holiday, we planned to go shopping at her request. I asked John to drive us. "Hey, could you drive us? I'm going shopping with your mother." "Sorry, I have work today," John said, dressed in a suit, but something felt off. "What's with the suit?" "Oh, this. I got it new. It was a bit expensive, but it's important to look the part as the owner," John explained. I understood his reasoning, but it had been quite some time since he started his business. It made me wonder. I recalled an internet article suggesting that sudden changes in attire could be a sign of infidelity. Yet, there was no concrete evidence. Reluctantly, after seeing John off, I went out with my mother-in-law in a taxi, but couldn't stop thinking about John all day. Was he really having an affair? Since then, I've had my doubts about John. I thought about confronting him directly when the opportunity arose. Days passed without him showing any suspicious behavior. Time simply flowed on. Eventually, Matt informed us of his employment and later his marriage. Despite this, I couldn't find any solid proof of John's infidelity. I can't find evidence of infidelity, but now that Matt has his own family, maybe it wouldn't be a problem if we divorced. Just when I was contemplating this, my mother-in-law injured her leg going to the bathroom at night. Fortunately, the injury wasn't severe, but she was quite shaken and suddenly brought up this topic. "I've decided to go to a nursing home after all, and I have a request for you." The situation was completely different from before. If I chose divorce, my mother-in-law could be left alone. This thought made me unable to refuse her request. I decided to act according to her wishes. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've been visiting my mother-in-law every weekend. After all, I'm concerned about your mother and can't bring myself to think about divorce. Muttering to myself, I returned home. "I'm back." "Ah, Mom, welcome back," Matt said. His wife, Sarah, was also there. "We've been waiting for you, Mother. Why are Matt and his family here?" Wondering, I asked Matt, "Matt, why are you here?" Well, just as Matt was about to answer, John appeared from behind and said to me, "You're so heartless. I've considered divorcing you and called everyone here." "What do you mean?" "It's about Mom. You haven't fulfilled your duties as a wife." John raised his voice. I trembled in shock. "But your mother." Before I could argue, John interrupted. "No excuses. From now on, you're moving out, and Matt's family will live here." Stunned by his declaration, Sarah added insult to injury by yelling at me, "Yeah, disappear quickly. Annoying parasite." I was dumbfounded, unable to form a response. I felt an impulsive need to argue back. So, it was true. My feelings were not accepted. John didn't care about me at all. That's why he could say such things with ease. Why did I endure all this? Without much thought, I realized I should have divorced sooner to avoid this humiliation. It was too much. I had to show them my worth by any means necessary. With a bitter smile, I said, "Understood. I'll leave." I declared this and left the room, glancing sideways at them. I went straight to my room, grabbing only a change of clothes and my work laptop, along with my bank book and a few valuables. I packed the essentials in a travel bag. "Are you really planning to divorce?" Yes, I am, I replied, picking up my luggage. After a moment of contemplation, I proposed to John. I've decided. We'll divorce amicably for $10,000. If that's unacceptable, I'll hire a lawyer and deal with it thoroughly. It might be modest for adultery compensation. However, I didn't have the energy to fight with John at this point. So, I deliberately offered terms favorable to John. Why should I pay compensation? Because you're the one who brought up divorce. But I stared at John as he hesitated. Smiling, I said, then, shall we go through a lawyer? If adultery is discovered, it won't end with just $10,000. What? At least $30,000. If you're innocent, that should be fine, right? It was clear what choice John would make. It was a strategy that risked everything. Seeing John grit his teeth in anger, I was internally convinced. He must have been unfaithful, but I couldn't obtain proof. Therefore, I decided to bluff as if I had evidence to pressure John. What will it be? If we go to a lawyer, I'll also demand compensation from your affair partner. I don't want to cause unnecessary worry for your mother. I'd rather not escalate the issue, but, faced with these words, John reluctantly replied, fine. I'll pay $10,000 within this week. That's fine. I'll come back on the weekend and then we can, settle the divorce papers. Saying this, I slipped past John with a smile and left the house. Afterward, I headed to a nearby cafe to start looking for a new place to live. My options were limited to a short-stay apartment. Guess I'll settle for this for now. Reluctantly renting a short-stay apartment, I decided to stay there for the time being. On the promised weekend, I went to my in-laws' house where John was. When I rang the doorbell, Sarah appeared. Oh, what brings you here? Just here to pick up some things. And to take things like the divorce papers. I see. Sarah's dismissive attitude was evident. I couldn't understand why Matt married someone like her. Entering the house, John was waiting with an envelope on the table. Here's the divorce paper. The compensation is also enclosed. Understood. Inside the envelope were the signed divorce papers and a bundle of $10,000, which I put in my bag. I'll leave the moving of my room's items to a mover. Do whatever you want. John was clearly in a bad mood, despite being the one who suggested divorce. I couldn't understand why he was dissatisfied. Shaking my head, I proceeded with the moving preparations. When all was done, I handed John a bank book. This is the account book for depositing living expenses. I've been doing it until now, but from now on, please make sure to deposit it directly. I get it. John almost snatched the bank book from my hands, acting like a child. I sighed internally and headed to where Matt and Sarah were in the living room. I have something to tell you. I don't have anything to say to you, though. Here, take this. When I took out the bank book, Sarah's attitude changed instantly. What? Are you giving us money? No, that's not it. This is the account book for living expenses. Oh, is that so? Sarah's disappointment was palpable. Matt will deposit the living expenses there for you to use. So tedious. Annoying. Sarah muttered under her breath. Pretending not to hear, I told her, the management of living expenses for John and the rest of the family will now be your responsibility. Understand? Yes, I got it. Sarah responded without much enthusiasm. I left there with a sigh. After handing over the account book for living expenses and obtaining the divorce papers, my connection with John and his family was severed. I felt a sense of relief. A few days after that exchange, while I was working in my room, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. Who could it be? At such a busy time. I sighed and checked the screen to see it was Matt calling. Isn't it his work hours? It was just past 10 a.m. There was still time until lunch break, so it might be an emergency. With that thought, I pressed the answer button. Hello, Matt? Is something wrong? Hey, Mom, where are you? I'm at home. What's up? I asked, only to be met with an unexpectedly loud response from Matt. The account is empty. What's going on? Surprised by the volume, I momentarily pulled the phone away from my ear. Putting it back, I asked, "Are you talking about the account I set up for living expenses?" "Obviously. Why is the account empty?" "We can't make ends meet like this." Indeed, that was the case. I deliberately left the account empty. The contents were from my income, and I felt no obligation to leave anything for them. Thinking this, I asked Matt, "Haven't you deposited any living expenses yet?" Matt struggled to find words in response. Something was off. What was happening? I asked again for confirmation. "So, you haven't deposited any living expenses, have you?" "That's right. I thought you would take care of it." "Why would you think that?" "We no longer share the same life," I pointed out. Matt fell silent at my words. I continued, "I should have made it clear to Sarah as well. You were supposed to deposit money for your own living expenses. You did say that, but what's so difficult about contributing your earnings to the family?" At that moment, Matt whispered, "I got laid off." "What?" "Say that again?" "I lost my job. I have no salary." I raised my voice. "What? You got fired?" "That's right." The truth is, he started explaining why he had returned home. Matt spoke about the events that led to his return home just before it happened. He had made a significant mistake at work. Normally, a mere mistake wouldn't lead to dismissal. However, it seemed Matt tried to blame his subordinate for the failure. Revealing the mistake would mean losing a chance for promotion and facing a salary cut, a blow to his pride. Driven by selfish motives, he attempted to shift the blame. But his actions were quickly discovered, leading to his inevitable resignation. "What about severance pay or unemployment benefits? Can't you live off those?" "There's nothing left. I've used it all up." After losing his job, Matt had been dipping into his savings to scrape by. He mentioned that living on unemployment benefits made life easier than expected. He should have found a new job during that period. But Matt took no action, overconfident in his abilities. Believing he could find a job anytime, he spent his days playing around with Sarah instead. By the time he seriously started looking for a job, he was rejected everywhere. In this dire situation, John's offer to move in came. I was planning to live off Dad's money. But upon arriving, Dad firmly said he had no money. "That's unfortunate. Mom, could you just deposit this month's living expenses in the account?" Matt pleaded. I replied, "You're joking, aren't you?" "This is not joke. I'm serious." "Well, if this is not a joke, it's payback then. You all kicked me out, remember?" My firm words silenced Matt for a moment. However, he quickly retorted, "It was Sarah and Dad who kicked you out. I had nothing to do with it. You did nothing to stop it. Reflect on that. Goodbye." After ending the call, I set my phone to block his number. Hopefully, this would make them reconsider. Smiling, I waited for any contact from the other two, but received nothing from Sarah. About a month has passed since my separation from John. I might get some contact from John. Glancing at the calendar, I realized it's the end of the month. Perhaps I might hear from him today. Holding on to that expectation, my smartphone alerted me to a new email. It's here. The sender was John calling for a gathering. Fortunately, it was Sunday, and I had no plans. With anticipation, I headed to the designated meeting place, guessing what John might propose. I was curious about how he would react when he knew everything. Upon arriving at the designated cafe, John was already there. "Sorry for being late." I greeted him with a smile and took a seat opposite him. Next to him sat Sarah. She looked displeased as I examined her. "Don't stare at me like that." "Sorry, but what's the reason for all of us to be here?" "It's about an important discussion related to our household's financial situation." Sarah frowned and was clearly upset. "That's bound to be the reason, I suppose." I thought to myself, looking at John. He started to speak hesitantly. "Actually, we got a call from the real estate management company." "Do you know anything about it?" "Real estate management company? What about them?" As I posed the question, Sarah looked at me angrily. Pointing at me, she raised her voice. "You must know something. Be honest." Even if you say that. I pretended to be confused. John leaned forward. The real estate company mentioned something about rent, but we own our house. That's true. When I told them it must be a mistake, they even brought up suing us, John said, tapping the table with his finger, his anger evident. Seeing his frustration, I decided to reveal the truth. Did you actually deposit the living expenses? Yes, I did. That's a lie. If you had, we wouldn't be in this situation. I counted, and John's face showed surprise. Smiling, I shared the truth. The rent in question is for the family home. It should have been paid from the account I gave you. Wait a minute. We own our own home. There's no need to pay any rent. Well, the truth is, your mother sold the house, so your family no longer owns it, I explained. John and Sarah looked puzzled by my explanation. I then began to detail the whole story. A while back, when the decision was made for my mother-in-law to move into a nursing home, there was one obstacle. Although her pension could cover the monthly payments, she couldn't afford the lump sum required for admission. I suggested a lease-back option to her. With this approach, she could remain in her familiar home while securing the necessary funds. However, this meant that regular lease payments would become necessary. So, I decided to allocate the $500 you were supposed to contribute monthly to the household for this payment. What about the living expenses then? I was covering those entirely, which amounted to $2,000 a month. John and Sarah were visibly shocked. If you had properly provided for living expenses, it would have just been deducted for the payment. But once you understand, please make the transfer promptly and continue to do so in the future. Okay. As I smiled, John began to panic. Sensing something was off, John finally confessed his true situation. Actually, my business failed and the company went bankrupt. Why did that happen? Well, as John hesitated, Sarah indignantly pointed out, he was having an affair and spent a fortune on that woman. That's why we're broke. According to Sarah, John had used the business funds to lavish money on his mistress, leading to the business's collapse. Unable to tell me directly, they hoped for Matt's financial support by inviting him and his family home. It's all Dad's fault. No, that's not. How is it not your fault? Pushing your responsibility onto others. You and your son are the same. Sarah erupted and an argument ensued. As they began to quarrel, I quietly left the scene. Later on, John and Matt struggled to find re-employment, and with the rent deadline approaching, they reluctantly started working part-time in retail. However, Matt couldn't stand being instructed by younger part-timers and quit. John, mocked for his age in his 50s, lost the will to continue working. Ultimately, they ended up borrowing money from dubious lenders and were forced to work on a fishing boat to repay their debts. Now, they are reportedly working on crab fishing boats in the north. Meanwhile, Sarah, having given up on them, returned to her parents' house temporarily. However, debt collectors visited there too, so she's currently working night shifts. As for myself, I'm enjoying living alone, occasionally visiting my mother-in-law in the nursing home, and leading a fulfilling life. My mother-in-law sometimes asks about remarriage, but I'm not in that mindset yet. However, there's someone at the nursing home who has caught my attention. It seems my mother-in-law has noticed too, but for now, I wish to just watch